So thank you everyone for attending. Wherever you are in the world, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night. Thank you for joining the International Astronomical Union Early Career Astronomy Online Discourse Series. My name is Christopher Moore. I am at the Harvard Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics here in the United States of America. I'm also a member of the Junior Member Executive Committee, helping put on this seminar series.
So hello everyone, welcome to this online discourse event. My name is Gael Bulgen. I'm also a member of the Executive Committee for the IAU Junior Members, and I'm working at the Observatory of Geneva in Switzerland.
And we have a very well-distinguished, very active speaker in more than just astronomical research. We have Dr. Gina Halabi, and she will be speaking to us today on a talk entitled How Stories Can Shape Realities on Earth and in Space. So Dr. Gina Halabi is an astrophysicist and social entrepreneur. She's working at the University of Cambridge. Previously, she was a research scientist at the Institute of Astronomy and junior research fellow at Wolfson College, University of Cambridge. Gina is the first person to obtain a PhD in astrophysics from a Lebanese university, the American University of Beirut, where she worked as a lecturer before moving to Cambridge. Gina is also founder and executive director of She Speaks Science, an award-winning global and multilingual enterprise that helps young people build a positive STEM identity and promotes women and minority scientists with storytelling. She is a mentor and advisor with the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs and sits on the advisory board for public engagement at Cambridge University. Gina also consults and leads training workshops on academic and business storytelling and is physical theater practitioner. She's also a public speaker at international conferences, global forumings, including the UN Women, UNOOSA, and TEDx, and is featured in mainstream media, including BBC Future and various podcasts. I personally watched her TED Talk and I thought it was amazing. I was very inspired by your story, Gina. And like I said, she's a well-established, very, very active leader in our field and in the world. So I like to put the floor, I'd like to give the floor to you, Gina, so you can take it over.
Thank you so much, Christopher. Thank you so much for the whole team. Hi, everyone. Thank you for the team for putting this together. It's such a pleasure to be with you all, although I can't really see all of you. This talk was supposed to be a keynote in Paris when the committee first reached out to have it done. But here I am in my spare bedroom turned office instead. It's not as exciting, but the advantage is that if this were to be held in Paris, I wouldn't have been able to reach so many of you in different parts of the globe. So we are certainly not wasting a good crisis here, at least in this sense. It was actually a bit difficult to prepare for this talk because there's so much I want to talk to you about, and I felt it might be a bit scattered. But I promise you, eventually I found the golden thread that would run through everything I'm going to tell you today. And let's hope this thread doesn't fray and holds on until as the talk evolves. As Christopher mentioned, I lead a portfolio career. My career now sits at the intersection of science, business, and education. There are 5 hats that I wear, and the 5 of them are somehow relevant to our talk today. I'm an astrophysicist by background, as been mentioned. I did my research on stellar evolution. I'm a storyteller. I use storytelling to do science communication and science writing. I consult on space and on storytelling, also as Christopher mentioned. And also, I work on business education and entrepreneurship education at the Cambridge Judge Business School, as well as being an entrepreneur, a social entrepreneur, having started She Speaks Science. And perhaps She Speaks Science is the most relevant component to what I'm going to be talking about today. She Speaks Science is about promoting women in STEM and about changing the perspectives of the young generation towards STEM, building a positive identity around STEM and who gets to be a scientist, which is funded currently by the International Astronomical Union. We'll talk a little bit about that later. I've structured my talk into 3 parts. The first part, I've called it the budding part, and this will tackle my childhood and the grounded dream. Part 2 is about the becoming, and this is about my path into astrophysics and going down this untrodden path. Part 3 is the being, and this is more the present, me now, and my work on shaping new realities, if you'd like. As a teenager, I wanted to become a pilot in the Air Force. I was born in Lebanon back in the 80s when the country was grappling with a raging civil war. So throughout my childhood, there's been also, as the civil war was sort of going away and waning, conflict remained. And so throughout my childhood, you know, like the sounds of artillery were my lullaby, a very unpleasant one, I assure you. And sonic booms were the alarm. And so as teenager, probably this experience has, you know, can explain this desire, the early desire to become a fighter pilot, despite my, you know, relatively conservative upbringing in a village, in a small village in Lebanon. However, to my 15-year-old self, I had no stories about, or role models about, young Lebanese women who are breaking clouds. So to me, this path seemed cordoned off, and it felt like I had no business trespassing. So having no role model meant I had no permission. Can you believe how strong that message is? So I dismissed the thought of becoming fighter pilot completely, and the dream was grounded. But I kept looking skyward in a way, and this sent me down the untrodden path of the second part of the talk of becoming an astrophysicist. But even that wasn't an easy path. It was certainly unconventional, and it was enshrouded in uncertainty, very much like these days, really. No one had done that before. So it was the first homegrown PhD in astrophysics in Lebanon. And I had to forge my own path. I had to build my own network. I had to find my own working pattern. I didn't have a big group. Our group was just me and my supervisor, really. So it wasn't easy at all. And my research was on stellar structure and evolution. And my PhD specialty, if you want, was on RGB and AGB stars, red giant branch stars and asymptotic giant branch stars, understanding convection, chemical mixing, and later on during my postdoc, understanding rotation and trying to model stars in 2 dimensions rather than 1 dimension, which might be, some of you would know about this. Being an astrophysicist has certainly informed what I do today. Of course, you heard many times how, you know, we as astronomers, we embrace this cosmic perspective or at least we like to think that we do. One of the wonderful things about astronomy education is teaching this notion of global citizenship, of shared responsibility, this idea that it takes a cosmos to make a human, right? But one thing you might not have thought of before is that being an astrophysicist has taught me about agency. I don't need to tell you that in astrophysics, we are dealing with extremely complex systems. But you also know that each component of this system has a role to play and affects the bigger system. I mean, I was working on stars, and together with the planets and the galaxies, they form what percentage of the universe? 4%. But still, stars altered the dynamics of the cosmos. They create energy, radiation, they've created planets and people, at least one civilization that we know of. And so what I want to tell you here is that no matter how small one's role can be, it does play a part in a bigger ecosystem, whatever that may be and wherever that is. And so this informs my work, whether through She Speaks Science or through my work in entrepreneurship and business, trying to help entrepreneurs to make their business sustainable and to scale up. So this comes really with a strong sense of agency and as someone who can bring about change. So this grounded childhood dream isn't a sad story ultimately, really, because now it drives me in the work I do, broadening access so that the young generation do not miss out on being astronauts or astrophysicists or engineers or mathematicians or pilots, just because they don't see anyone who looks like them doing it. And, believing that what gets me out of bed every day and to continue working on this is this realization that no matter what role I end up playing, it would make a difference in someone's life. And to conclude this part, my message here really is go down the untrodden, uncharted paths. You'll figure them out. It might be scary and you might be the first doing something, but that's exactly the thrill of it. The second message is do not visualize glass ceilings. Don't let them put a lid on your dreams. Of course, structural biases exist, and we know that they do, and I'm sure some of you have experienced them. But hopefully there's always another way. There's a crack somewhere, there's an opportunity. And I wonder if the audience here with us, you've heard of Chuck Yeager. He is the American test pilot who became the first to break the sound barrier in flight. And he was later immortalized in Tom Wolfe's book, The Right Stuff, about how these test pilots own the right stuff, the bravery, the unspoken quality that makes them do these high stakes, very dangerous jobs. And because he's a fighter pilot, his story really struck a chord with me. He died aged 97 on Tuesday, actually. So in his autobiography, Yeager described the moment of breaking the speed of sound as an oddly underwhelming experience in terms of the actual physical experience, perhaps not the psychological one. And in his book, he writes that after all the anticipation and the build-up for this moment, it was a letdown. And he says, and I quote, "There should have been a bump in the road, something to let you know that you had just punched a nice clean hole through the sonic barrier. It was a poke through Jello. Later on, I realized that the real barrier wasn't in the sky, but in our knowledge and experience of supersonic flight. So the real barrier is oftentimes what we think is possible and what we believe can be done. It's in our heads. So what's your story? What's your passion? And are you following that through? As Christopher mentioned at the beginning, I coach on storytelling, I lead workshops, I do one-on-one training, and the executives and researchers I do this for both, people in academia and in business, and the people I have coached on understanding their personal story, their journey, is an immense source of confidence. This self-awareness. I haven't yet added anything to their knowledge externally, yeah? I only help them visualize and find and own this story. And think about it this way. The hopes and the dreams of your past have sent down ripples through the years that shaped who you are now, your current reality. But since then, they've obviously changed, right? And you may have even forgotten them. Call them redshifted as your life has expanded and grew, yeah? And now you'd be observing these distant dreams at these high redshifts, but then you can tell about how your career has evolved, how your journey has evolved, how you can now shape your own future, your own reality, and have that agency. And so this brings us to the third part about shaping realities and how storytelling and owning one's story is an essential component of that. And this is what we do in storytelling through She Speaks Science. And before I get into exactly what we do with She Speaks Science, storytelling, remember that She Speaks Science is about two things. It's about women in STEM, promoting women in STEM, and about encouraging the younger generation to think of themselves as scientists, or to be able to visualize or internalize the notion that they can be scientists if they want to. And storytelling in this context is important for two reasons. Reason number one is that when you share these stories, you can call out the biases and help fix the system. When anecdotes become 1 million, they become data. Statistically relevant data that you can push those in power to do something about. Biases exist, from facing subtle exclusions to hostility sometimes, or being passed over for promotions or award nominations. And sharing these stories is important so that we don't feel alone, so we can start fixing the system. I don't know if you have, excuse me, heard about the film that recently came out. It's called Picture a Scientist. I really, really encourage you to watch that. It's about these biases and this story sharing and pushing for change. And if I'd like you to do one thing today, is to take down this note. Picture a Scientist. I'd like you to push your institutions to get you a screening link, because this is how I got to say it. I don't know what the situation is when the screening will be, or whether it's available for individuals at the moment, but I got it through an institutional link. So push your institutions to send you a link with a password. It will be private to you, and you can see it, and make sure it's about stories of women, but it's a story of minorities as well. So make sure you have men in the room, because this is how we fix the system together. But this storytelling is not just about stories of bias. It's also about stories of achievement. Another component we really work on She Speaks Science is the concept of identification. You see, when we looked into this, we found out that the problem isn't inspiration. The youth are inspired. They love physics. They love chemistry. They like engineering and robots. They are inspired. They just think sometimes that STEM is not for them. And this is the dangerous story. So who is it for? Well, for one thing, It's a middle-aged, middle class, straight, white man, right? And this is not surprising. I mean, statistically, the images of the scientists we see is overwhelmingly of this category. Think of a scientist, you'd think of Einstein. Think of an inventor, you'd think Thomas Edison. This is, you know, you've heard this many times before, but I'm going to throw you a curveball here. I bet you that nobody in this room, this cyber room, hasn't heard of Richard Feynman, right? You've all heard of Richard Feynman. Now, who has heard of Joanne Feynman? Joanne is his sister, an astrophysicist no less. So shame on you. If you do not know Joanne, shame on you. Of course, I'm joking because very few people know her. She's done incredible work on solar wind, understanding auroras. But when she was a little girl, her mom told her that women's brains don't do science. And when she wanted to start her thesis on stars, she was told she'd be better off working on cobwebs, because that's what she'd be encountering while she's cleaning the house. But that's another story. Think about the portrayal of STEM professionals in the media. Between 2008 and 2018, I think these numbers are in the US. I've looked in many places to collect, you know, to find the number. And it's about 60 to 63% men, about 37% women. And if you think of the whole total, 20%, you know, men and women, 20% are minority backgrounds, Black, Asian, Middle Eastern, etc. If you think about the shows we've all been watching and enjoying, how many times have we seen nerdy men and hot women, right? I was watching the other day Friends, just because I wanted some white noise. I thought, maybe I watch, you know, I used to watch that growing up, and I couldn't believe how sexist and racist this show is, right? I mean, I don't know about you, but my generation, we really watched Friends almost all the time. One guy is a nerdy scientist, another is an accountant. Well, probably nobody knows what Chandler does, but I think he's an accountant. The women, one is a cook. She's obsessed about cleaning the house. The other is a fashion assistant after rich men. And the third doesn't believe in gravity. You know, this is the messages we're sending subliminally. How often are women told to marry a rich CEO rather than become one? But this is not the whole story. It's not just the five. What did we have? A middle-aged, middle-class, white, straight man. It's also a genius. So we've got 6 things. So a scientist to people is someone who is a genius, whose ideas fall from the sky. And this perception of a scientist being a genius is really doesn't help children who wanting to take up STEM, because our stereotypical models have enforced these ideas of a scientist being a genius rather than someone who really struggles to find the truth. We made scientists as figures to look up to rather than identify with, and that's a problem. And a study published in 2016 in Educational Psychology shows that students who are exposed to stories of struggle of scientists have higher motivation to do science and to identify with these scientists. So we really need to be careful that the stories we are sharing are inclusive and they send the right message. And that message doesn't cast a stereotype and doesn't stigmatize failure. I blame Red Riding Hood. How many times have we heard that story? And what message does that send? Be a nice girl, stick to the path, don't venture into the unknown, right? But I tell you one thing, make that wolf your friend and companion, because that's the kind of company you want, you have to keep. So bringing in identification with STEM and owning the story as people with achievements, as women and minorities who have achieved something, really helps bring the message to the public and to the young generation, and as well as bring a sense of confidence and sense of ownership among the women who are our storytellers. So what we do really is we publish online stories once a month, and we translate the story to 5 languages. So it's available in English, but also in Italian, in Spanish, in German, and in Arabic. So that we could reach more people. And we are now read in more than 130 countries around the globe. And really, this idea of normalizing failure is not just for the young people, it's for us. We really need these stories because we struggle with failure every day. I mean, Andrea Ghez, when she got her Nobel Prize in astrophysics in October, she said the first telescope proposal she put in was turned down because they didn't think the technology will work. And then she had to put another one again a couple of years later. So this is really a powerful message on how we overcome obstacles, how we become everyday better versions of ourselves, how we reinvent ourselves if we need to. And I really want to end on this note. Let me see how much time I have left. A few more minutes. I want to end on this note. I send a call to you to become involved, to be part of this movement. And there are so many different ways to become involved. Become a storyteller, own your story. Any scientist, especially from minority backgrounds, we encourage you to come forward and share the story. The stories that we share are about your work. So the focus isn't about the personal story of the scientist, but about the work they've achieved. And we very much focus on the relevance for the society in this work so that people can identify the importance of science in our society, the importance of scientists, and how we really need to be part of this public discourse. And the pandemic has taught us a lesson in that anyway. So you can be involved as a storyteller. You can be involved as a translator. We need translators for especially into Spanish and Italian and German. Connect with me on LinkedIn if you'd like to have a conversation about it. You can check out the website. It's at shespeaksscience.com. You can contact us there. There's an email address you can reach out on. I'd love to learn your story and to get questions from you and have a little conversation as well to understand better what you need. And I hope if this gives you one idea, besides go watch Picture a Scientist, is to encourage to plant a seed for owning your story. And what this means really is everything I've talked about is believing that if the going gets tough, there will be a better day. Even if you're the first to do something, embrace this as an amazing thing you're doing. And I hope throughout the discussion, we get to talk about mentorship as well. But I leave you with these thoughts, and I look forward to having this conversation now. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gina Halabi, for sharing your experiences, sharing what you're passionate about, talking about everything that you've been involved with. A lot of what you said and what I've seen from your media that's on the internet and your TED Talk has extremely resonated with me. And you mentioned about blazing a trail, essentially. And I like that because there's a phrase that I thought about when I was in grade school and in high school, and where I grew up, there were not many people that went on to become physicists, astrophysicists, or even go on to higher education outside of high school. And that phrase is, do not go where the path may lead, but instead blaze a trail, or go instead where there is no path and leave a trail, or blaze a trail, which is the way I like to say it. And I think that's what you've been doing throughout your entire career. I like to think there are aspects of my career which are analogous. And you're truly an inspiration to all of us, and anything that we can do here at the IAU Junior Member Executive Committee, let us know. And I encourage everyone right now to also, like she said, follow her on LinkedIn, send a chat. I don't know if you want to put out your Twitter handle or anything to also spread the knowledge, spread the information, build the network?
I will share my link because I'm most active and follow LinkedIn. So it'll be the best way to connect with me so that I also know what you've been up to. And I also put the website for She Speaks Science and my Twitter, although I don't use Twitter too much, I must admit, but I'm happy to connect with you anywhere. So on She Speaks Science as well, you can connect with us on social media or sign up to the newsletter to know when a new story is out. And, you know, very easy to find online.
Yes. And at this time, we will start asking questions. So you out there listening on YouTube or on Zoom, you can put in the Q&A in the chat feature, and we will ask your questions real time. So one question that we will start off with, in watching your TED Talk, you mentioned that you were the first person to obtain an astrophysics PhD from Lebanon, and you essentially articulated a concept called the brain drain, where people are educated, but then they may leave their home institutions, their home countries, and go to other countries. And so that leads to a depletion of talent locally. And you've done a lot in terms of empowering women and allowing them to become more leaders in STEM. What has been your experience since the 2013 TED Talk? How has Lebanon evolved? Are there more resources? Are there more personnel to help build the talent there and retain it? And also, particularly due to your expertise with building up the knowledge and the pool of women, how has that been going with the statistics? Is it equal or comparable representation, or is there still this lag essentially?
Thank you for the question. Regarding representation, when I was doing my PhD there, and I think it still is the case, when you look at graduate students, master's students, and PhD students, we were mostly women. The majority were women. And I think this may be because the men tend to leave the country, so they feel it's easier for them to leave the country. Maybe women are less encouraged to travel, although many women do travel for their PhD or for the master's degree. So, but we have more women than men when it comes to master's and PhD students. But when you get to professorship level, there's huge underrepresentation of women, huge. Regarding the students, so I don't keep a very close watch on the number, so I can't give you an exact number of the number of master's students or PhD students that have graduated, but I know that since I graduated in 2015 with my PhD, and since then there has been another PhD in astrophysics with the same supervisor, Dr. Munib Al-Aid, who was my supervisor. So this is great news. There have been, so two universities in Lebanon, the Notre Dame University and the American University of Beirut, where I graduated, that issue this degree or that offer the master's degree in astrophysics. And they've both been very active. And I would say maybe there are probably 10 to 20 people graduating with a master's degree maybe every year combined, but only the American University of Beirut offers a PhD in astrophysics. Last time I checked a couple of months ago. So I don't know of anybody else except one lady who graduated with a PhD, and my supervisor is retiring. So there are two astronomy professors in the department, so I'm hoping we'll have some more examples of these. So I'm sorry, I don't have the exact numbers. But you also asked about the situation of astronomy, and because of what's going on in Lebanon, the hyperinflation and the explosion that happened, it's been really difficult time. But the IAU has been playing a huge role in helping rebuild astronomy in Lebanon. You can imagine it's a bit of a lower priority for the people there, but there's always efforts, and I'm trying to help with that as well.
So you, first of all, thank you very much for your very inspiring talk. It's been a pleasure listening to you. I have a small question about, you talked a bit about identification and about the importance of inspiration. And also, I mean, something that resonates a lot is, of course, understanding also the importance of failure. And as you said, that's not mentioned enough. Exactly what inspired you in your early career? Did you have like an identification, someone that you could relate to, that you used as a way to push yourself forward?
I don't have one person who inspired me as such, but I've always been inspired by just ordinary people who are able to juggle many different things at the same time. So the brilliant pioneering astronomer who is also a mom of two, the extremely successful astrophysicist who runs a business. So this is kind of people who've always inspired me, and I thought I want to be like that. And I mean, no wonder I wear so many hats. Probably that's what I've been planning all along.
I'm particularly interested on a quick question. How has it been being an entrepreneur and a full-time scientist? How do you juggle that? Because both can be very demanding. Entrepreneurs, especially small business owners, when they're starting out, they can spend almost 80 hours a week on their business. And we know as full-time researchers, it could be demanding also, sometimes 60, 70 hours in a week if you have deadlines coming.
So I started She Speaks Science when I was still a postdoc, but at the moment I'm not a researcher anymore in that strict sense. I don't do astronomy research. I do more work with the business school on developing entrepreneurial education programs. I still do some space research, but in very different contexts with, for industry mostly. But my journey has seen like really busy times, and then things calm down, and then gets really busy. And when you're an entrepreneur, you're so much driven by it becomes labor of love. It becomes a passion, and it's what drives you. So I'm happy to work on She Speaks Science in the evenings or on the weekends, because it doesn't feel like work. It's something like I really enjoy doing. It's not easy, and it requires huge organizational skills. So you really need to be organized to be able to juggle all of this.
A quick question also, did you feel that, I mean, you made the switch from, I would say, academic research to more entrepreneurship and developing your own business. Did you feel like some of the competences that you developed in academic research were really, did you feel like it was an advantage over looking at, when you looked at other people trying to develop their own business, or did you feel like you were lagging a bit behind in some? I mean, there is a different work culture, of course, between the entrepreneurship and the academic research. Did you feel a strong difference, and did you feel advantage or not?
Well, it's a bit different, but you've got something new to learn every day, and you're constantly reinventing yourself and trying to remain relevant. But I've done so many things around different from research. I've worked in policy, I've worked in entrepreneurship, and there's definitely many things I've done during my research or being a postdoc that have helped, especially public speaking and work on communication. This has really helped me, because whatever job you land, you really need an element of communication there. And so this has quite helped me a lot. And building network. I've always grown I've always had a big network, and I tried to cultivate it. And so it helped me a lot as well. And I encourage everyone on the call, if they have in mind to kind of make that leap, to start growing their network early on.
I agree. Networking is a very powerful tool that can open opportunities that we did not envision before.
Yeah.
I see that we have some questions coming in the chat and the Q&A. We will start asking those very soon. We have one last initial question, which is there anything in your career that you would have done differently?
If I'm thinking about my research career, I would have diversified it. Looking back in hindsight, I would have diversified it. What I was working on is a bit too niche, and I would have liked to dip my toes more in maybe instrumentation or observational astronomy, working more on that aspect. So that's probably something I would have done. Or maybe in industry, taking internships in industry.
I agree. I actually had the opportunity to do that as a graduate student. Experiences with numerical simulations instrumentation, technology development, and also data analysis.
That's
So
wonderful. It's really, really important.
I agree. And interesting enough, I was given advice to the contrary in terms of being able to be advertised for a postdoc. I was told that that's too many different things, and they would not, employers would not know what box to put me in. But my point was having a wide array of experiences would allow me to have more information to choose which path out if I wanted to specify in the future as a postdoc. So as a graduate student, this is the opportunity to learn and get exposure and experience. So that was my strategy. And as you say, we have to blaze a trail a lot of times because the path may not be there.
Yes, and you can
So,
always keep things out of your CV. You can change your CV according to what you're applying for.
that's very true.
Have some secrets.
So we have some questions from the audience. I think Gail,
Yeah.
you can ask the first one.
I will start with one from the Q&A. So, how would you advise someone who has to start his or her own story when you're at the beginning of your journey? How would you advise the beginning? How would you really start this story?
It would need some soul searching. You need to really think about who you are, what you want to achieve, and look into the past and see what could have triggered this desire or this dream. Have you always wanted to become what you are now? And this kind of, so owning your story does two things. One, it makes you different and unique, because if you are an astronomer who has probably built your first telescope as, I don't know, a teenager or something, it really shows that early desire for the field, for this kind of field of knowledge. So it plays to your advantage when you're applying for jobs. There are situations where you could throw these stories in. The other part is about owning your story, is about internalizing your achievements so that your confidence internally grows, so that when you understand what your story is, you understand your core values. And once you identify your core values, you know who you should connect to, because then you'll be able to know, okay, these are people I could work with, and this is very efficient. Once you identify what your values are and make them clear, then you attract similar sort of people to your entourage, and together you can build a community, you can start doing great things together. And if you're working within a team, this also gives you power and value within your team, and it helps you connect with people better. So it's all about really this self-awareness. It comes down to this aspect of self-awareness.
I agree. Self-awareness is key. So the next question from our audience is, how did you get into public speaking, and what was your motivation for giving talks?
How did I get into public speaking? I just simply enjoyed it. I still remember to this day the first talk I ever gave. I was a master's student. Oh, no, actually, gosh. I was putting up plays, like I was directing plays and acting in them. I insisted on acting in them back from school. So I was, I remember this one play in the environment, something around the environment. So I've always enjoyed my spot on this stage for some reason. But mind you, the tension is always there. There's always an element of fear when you're speaking to people. It doesn't go away. But embrace this fear. If you're asking because you'd like to get into public speaking, embrace this fear, because it makes us deliver, it makes us, hone our messages and prepare and work. My TEDx talk, I stumbled into it by chance. I was just curious to know how it would go. And I get, it's like everything in life. You're just thinking, oh, I'm curious about that. I want to try it. It'll be really difficult, or you have to get out of your comfort zone. But this is what I did. And I went for it, and it was a phenomenal experience, and I really, really liked it. And then I kept going on stage. Whenever I get the opportunity to speak, I would just volunteer. I would go for it. And I've spoken on many different stages, and I've addressed audiences from all age groups, all seniority levels. So I think this is how I got into it. I just enjoyed the experience and kept building on it.
A follow-up to that, because it seems like like you said, you enjoy the limelight. Do you feel like your public speaking skills have opened up opportunities that would not have been there otherwise?
I think I got my postdoc because of my TEDx talk. Because I tell you why. I've never said this before, but I remember that I worked at the Institute of Astronomy with an astronomer, Rob Izzard. And when I applied, well, I've met him from a conference before, but the reason I applied for a conference he was organizing, and he didn't know me, and he didn't know my PhD supervisor at the time. And when my application was accepted for fully funded participation in the conference, he mentioned my TEDx talk. So I think looking at my TEDx talk has made him think she can speak. And although now I look at my TEDx talk, I don't watch it anymore. So it's like so long ago. So he probably thought, oh, okay, she can speak. And then I was at the conference, and then this is how I met him. And then later on, when there was an opening, because he knew me, I got the job. I mean, you usually get, this is how you get jobs these days. If people know you, you have higher chances. So it has really impacted. Maybe in ways I don't even know. I still get sometimes messages from people I meet saying that we watched your TEDx talk. So maybe it's influencing my career in ways I haven't even figured out.
So are you telling all the graduate students out there, if they want to get a postdoc?
Get a TEDx talk. Well, I would definitely say if you would like to give it a go, definitely go for it. And even if it's not your cup of tea, just go for it, and you learn the tricks. And I mean, over the years, I've learned techniques to reduce anxiety. Like you always have something to learn. You always have something to improve. So even if you're not perfect, just go for it. I'd recommend it.
And doing all these talks and public events, of course, as you mentioned with the example of Rob Izzard, it's also some sort of networking to some extent, actually, from a distance, because you're getting yourself known, you're getting your work and your capabilities appreciated. So and I guess also you have to be able to send a clear message also during the talk. Being able to deliver a clear message is the key.
Absolutely. Communication is really key for every scientist.
Bouncing about the idea of messages, we had a live question asking your opinion, since you mentioned Friends, asking your opinion about the TV series The Big Bang Theory regarding the message that is sent.
Well, I mean, I think Big Bang Theory, I haven't really watched it as closely as I've done Friends. But I think Big Bang Theory did two things. Same thing also, there's an element of these nerdy guys, right? Although they're a bit more diverse in a sense, but there's also an element of that. It's the nerdy guys, but also I think it has had impacted the people because it changed the idea of who a scientist is in the public's eye. So people could see that a scientist isn't necessarily they have their own vulnerabilities, right? So they can be really bad in personal relationships, they struggle with stuff, they're real humans. So I think it sort of brought this message to the people about scientists not living in some ivory towers, like just in their own worlds, although they do sometimes, but there's another aspect to their work. They have romantic failures and things like that. So I think it has played a positive role in humanizing scientists, I think.
Definitely, I think, yeah. And the idea with the social skills, etc. I mean, looking at the I would say the academic landscape, yes, we can also relate to that to some extent, definitely.
And also, if you think about a scientist and how the media has been, you know, the cartoons we used to watch as children, a scientist was usually this white man with white hair and a lab coat and doing some evil experiments in the shed, right? And wanting to blow up the world. So the scientist has been put forward as some evil person. And, you know, I mean, all these messages, you know, like they really affect the trust with the scientist without even us knowing.
Exactly. I think we can go back to the questions we had. You talked a bit about mobility and about the fact that, for example, in Lebanon, men would go study abroad. If you think about a woman that is now following your path, what advice would you give her to facilitate mobility from the international level, let's say at the postdoc stage or something like that, coming from a country like Lebanon?
Visibility. Get on as many stages as you can. Because this is your chance to put your name out there, especially if you're you're disadvantaged because of being from a less known research group or a less known institution. So yes, visibility, I would say. If public speaking is not your thing, have a blog, you know, be active on social media. Yeah, I'm not terribly active on social media myself, but if it's for you, yeah, go for it.
So I guess we have another question that's very similar. It says, what would you say to a young, motivated person with very little to no resources? Sounds like you when you were young.
You read my mind. I was thinking, what would I've told my 15-year-old self back when she wanted to become a pilot? I would say, for those people who do not have resources in their countries, ask your teachers and insist that they provide some resources. I doubt that a teacher would not be able to guide you in a certain way. Chances are they have access to the internet and they can suggest maybe a summer camp or a course or an online activity or something they can apply for. So ask your teachers for resources and insist that they provide you opportunities. Keep asking, keep at it, and reach out through your support groups. Recently, I was contacted by a young Mexican lady. She's 14 years old. She wanted to study galaxies. And I was amazed. I mean, at her age, I had no idea what I'm going to do. I probably wanted to become a pilot, but that's as far as it went in terms of detail. She wants to study galaxies. So she knew no astrophysicists at all. But I happened to be working with her sister. Her sister is part of She Speaks Science. And so because she knew her sister was passionate about astrophysics, she put us in touch, and I was very happy to talk to her about it and advise. And I put her in touch with Mexican astrophysicists who could help her more than I can, because they would tell her what courses to take, what schools to go to, what universities to apply for. So from one person to the other, you can really reach someone who can help you. And this is a message for everyone here on this call. Whoever you are, whatever your level is, you are to someone a role model. If you are a professional, there's a grad student looking up to you. If you're a graduate student, there's a high schooler looking up to you. If you're a high schooler, there's a young school girl or boy looking up to you. So I really encourage you to assume this responsibility and try to build this community by reaching out and helping and asking, how can I help? Because sometimes these young people they don't know what to ask. They say, oh, I like this, but then that's where it stops. If you initiate the conversation, can I help you in any way? Would you need any resources? This kind of helps them open up. And what I want to say as well on this point is that we are opening up a mentorship program on She Speaks Science. And so this is the first time I announce it because it's not announced yet. And I really encourage you, if you'd like to be part of it, and there's an element of mentorship and being mentored in it, mentoring and being mentored. And if you'd like to be part of that, please do reach out to us, and I will make sure you get the details once the call is out. And it's open to people all over the globe, obviously.
So you touched a bit the role of supervision and mentoring in that respect. Do you feel like, for example, the networking capabilities that you've developed, I mean, you definitely want to put them to use for younger people? And I mean, would you have some advice to someone, for example, starting to have, I don't know, PhD students or having high schoolers, for example? Sometimes we do these fairs, you know, where you have high schoolers coming at you and asking you questions. And yes, I mean, sometimes we only see the downsides, for example, of the scientific career and of the field. So how would you advise someone to put, you know, your knowledge to use in that respect as a mentor and sometimes as a supervisor also of master, high school or grad school?
Sorry, I'm not sure I understand the question.
So the thing is, so you mentioned, for example, how helping out people. I mean, maybe it's a bit of a personal question. I'm supervising, for example, a PhD student, right? First PhD student that I have to supervise. And sometimes, you know, I look at the field and I'm like, okay, you know, the career path, for example, in science, in academia, is a bit difficult, and you come with young people motivated. How would you feel trying to play? I mean, how would you feel like someone can play the role model for that people and keeping them motivated, looking, for example, at the chances to get a grant, at the chances, you know, to be accepted somewhere?
I see what you mean.
You see the statistics.
You remind me of a colleague of mine. We were in a event like this, like an open evening, and there were these young people coming up to us, and he was just standing next to me. And there was this mom coming up with her boy, and she told him, "Oh, my boy wants to become an astronomer." And and my colleague looked at her and said, "Madam, don't you see my receding hairline?" And this is on your point. Like, what the hell are you thinking, honestly? So, well, what the message I give is that it's tough, it's really enjoyable, but it's difficult. And you really want to study hard and you want to work hard and you need to be prepared to fail. And you just really need to pick yourself back up, dust off your clothes, and try again and continue on. So it's always good to prepare them to this prospect that, look, it's not easy. And not many people continue in that path. But anyway, if they get their PhD in astronomy, they can also go on and do any sort of job they like. You know, they'd be talented in many different ways. So it's never wasted, even if academia is a very thorny path and writing grants. And we know all the issues with being a postdoc and instability. And especially it comes at a time when you're starting a family, perhaps, and trying to settle down. And you also have financial responsibilities. So you know, you can always call it quits with academia and choose something else. But the skills that you learn during your PhD or your master's degree are always transferable and really good for you for your future.
Well, we have one last question that we could wrap up with.
Okay.
So what advice would you give women trying to act as role models for younger generations? And how do you see your role as a supervisor? Kind of articulated it already, but I guess you could reemphasize.
Yes. You might think, oh, what can I say to this young girl or this young person? And who am I anyway? And what have I achieved? As I said earlier, someone is looking up to you and thinking, being all starry-eyed and thinking, oh, I want to be this person. So really, again, own your achievements and where you have reached, and assume this responsibility. And this kind of role comes with a really a sense of responsibility. So I'd like to emphasize that the kind of messages we send, the kind of shaping the ambitions of these people. So I would definitely I mean, I encourage everybody to take on that role because it does make a difference. And I'm part of UN Office for Outer Space Affairs, the UN Office for Outer Space Affairs. They have a program called Space for Women. And, you know, it's double meaning, Space for Women. And I was one of the early people on, you know, on the conception of this idea of this global network. And now we're about 30 mentors globally, and we have our own mentees, and you can apply to become a mentee on that program or become a mentor. I think the application for mentorship starts in January, and you can always apply to be mentored by these women. And we are, you know, from all sorts of industries, all career levels. And hopefully this, you know, being plugged into this network gives you a sense of what to expect being a mentor, or if you'd like to be a mentee, like the kind of questions and support environment you can get. But in general, if I'm to give like advice that helped me, advice that have been pivotal in my career, they would be, don't take things personally. You will get rejections a lot. Do not take them personally. If you get rejected for a promotion or a job, apply again the next year, or just don't think it's you. It's not you. And also don't think personally in a sense that don't think, what would people think about me if I do this? They might think for 5 minutes and then they forget, and then they move on, and then you move on. It doesn't matter anymore. And the second advice would be, you know, public speaking, getting yourself out there. And the third one would be network. Invest in your network and cultivate it, because you will definitely need it at some point. And these are just in general advice, which would be relevant in a mentorship aspect as well, perhaps.
So I think it's going to be time to wrap up. I want to thank you again very much for being with us today. It was very inspiring, very nice talk.
Yeah.
And to all the people attending, well, I want to wish you happy holidays. Stay safe. Enjoy the holiday season, and stay tuned for the future events of the online discourses for next year. And a small advertisement that I want to make also, we had just the announcement of the winner of the photo contest for November 2020. So I remind you to send your photographs to the email address, and you can send a photo via email, Twitter, Dropbox, Slack. So you can just go on this link, you can click and see the details, and you can apply, and then you'll be announced perhaps as a future winner for December 2020. So thank you all for joining us today. Thank you again, Dr. Halabi, for being with us.
And
it's been a pleasure.
I'd just like to add to the participants with us today, whatever you celebrate this time of year, I wish you a very merry and bright time and cheerful time with those you cherish and love. So happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Happy holidays. Bye.
Bye.